Yeah, I think that's cool. That's what the kids are doing, right? Side part, low pony. Is that Gen Z? Or is that like millennial? Is that old folks? We'll never know. Hello, my name is Ivy, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you are returning. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start off today's video by saying that this was entirely inspired by a comment from a viewer slash creator slash friend, Cam Cloveroom, on YouTube and on Instagram. I will link their channels below. They commented on one of my videos about how they are intrigued by the world of single shadows and independent shadow brands, but feel maybe a little overwhelmed by that world, right? Like, it's a big, expensive, varied world that, if you're not familiar with it, can feel very overwhelming. And there's a lot of single shadow content on this platform, but not a lot of it really gears itself towards how do you get started? How do you become less overwhelmed by all the options and like narrow your focus to create what might work for you? That's the goal for today's video. I really want to create your starter guide, your starter pack to single shadows, and encourage you that it doesn't have to be super scary, it doesn't have to be super overwhelming, and it can be really fun. Also, I was a very big newbie not that long ago to this world, and so I'm not coming at this with any kind of like long extended wisdom. I'm going to be sharing a lot of creators who are super people in this space to go to for information, who have a wealth of shadows in their collections, that make content that really like spells everything out for you, that will be much more in depth than I am. The purpose of this video is really to just like show you how maybe you can get started, how I got started, and hopefully dip your toes into this single shadow world without feeling like, it's too much. So again, thank you, Cam, for the comment. Thank you for being the arbiter behind this video. I hope you enjoy it as well as anybody else who's watching. Okay, I made an outline for this video. It's the first time that I've ever done that. It's probably why a lot of my videos are chaotic, because I don't typically make outlines. But I really wanted to make sure that I touched on all of the important parts of this whole world. So I'm going to start with why single shadows, why indie brands, what are some of the pros and the cons of dipping into this space. It's pretty cool that for a very long time, it was only big brands that you could get makeup from. And now, much like creatordom and, so many other pieces of our lives have become, more accessible to the average person, so too has makeup. We're sort of pulling the veil back off of like the fact that it doesn't always have to be a CoverGirl or a Revlon or a major brand like a Pat McGrath who's putting out makeup. Individuals can do it and can do a great job. There's so many resources out there on like how to make shadows yourself at home. Of course, there's a level of quality that might sort of like dip in and out depending on how new someone is to this, but it's accessible to a lot of people. And so therefore, the world of makeup has gotten so much bigger and so much more interesting, because now you have individuals or small companies that are starting to put out really cool and interesting things. They're not beholden to shareholders or market share or whatever. They're able to get out there and like give you what they got, and you can pay for it and you can try it, and it'll be either good or bad. And like, the fact that that exists now is super duper cool. So I just love that independent makeup brands have expanded what you can get, expanded what you can do, expanded accessibility for people. The pros, I think, are generally that you can customize what you're getting. So with single shadows in particular, the ability to create your own color stories by picking out shades and then building your own palettes, at least to me, is a really awesome, exciting prospect. Like, I love that I can now look at something, be inspired by it, and then go into my bigger palettes of singles and build it. I may not be able to dupe out every palette that comes out, but then when a palette does come out that I'm like, ooh, I really want that and I don't think I can dupe it, then I can get it. Like, obviously the choices are yours, but the customization that you can get is really awesome. Formula is another huge bonus. Those of you who are familiar with the independent shadow world know well that you can't really get these kinds of formulas in mass market brands. There are only a few brands out there right now that kind of are able to do it. I think Danessa Myricks is one that's able to sort of do it. Pat McGrath maybe dipped her toe into that with some of these special shades. There's these independent shadow brands that have like really found their voice, found their look, found their feel, who are continually innovating and trying new things. And that means that you're just getting unique formulas all the time. I just love experimenting and trying new things. And it doesn't mean that every formula or every new thing is going to be a winner, but the fact that there's accessibility out there now to get and try new things is just really awesome, in my opinion. I would say that uniqueness is another one of the biggest pros for kind of dipping your toes into the single shadow world. Uniqueness is something that inherently comes with the territory because these smaller brands are trying to come out with new things all the time. They're trying to outdo each other. They're trying to show you something new. And so that means whatever you're using is generally going to be fairly unique when compared against mass market makeup. Like, it's just going to stand out. That's what I love about finding special shades. When I put those on my face and I share them, or I walk around even just outside my town, people are like, "What is on your eyes? That looks amazing." And it does. It does. Like, once you kind of land on your loves, you know, whatever brands you love, whatever formulas you love, whatever colors you love, man, you are going to rack up the compliments. It's so cool. And I also just love supporting small individual run brands. Like, if I'm going to spend money on things, I really like to know who I'm buying from and what I'm buying. And again, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to support bigger brands as well, but I have gotten to know a lot of creators through supporting their independent shadow brands and like seeing their businesses grow and thrive. And that to me is extremely rewarding. And it's just a cherry on top of the sundae. Like, I already like what I'm getting. And then I really like the experience, like the one-to-one customer service, the like getting to know these people and what their ethos is and their brand POV is and what they're trying to innovate with. You know, like, it's dope. So that's a bunch of the pros. Let's get into quickly the cons. The cons are that pricing and availability can often be problematic. I don't mean problematic in the sense of like completely making it inaccessible, but very often, because these are small, sometimes individual run brands, availability can be quite limited. So there's this sort of like rush to buy when there's a drop because you know it's going to sell out. It's like limited stock. You don't know when the person's going to have time to make more. And that can be stressful and can really trigger a lot of like impulse buying, which I don't love. I don't love getting sucked into impulse buying, but this world definitely lends itself to that kind of mentality just because of how it's structured. You know, when a big brand comes out with a launch, you don't necessarily need to worry about it selling out in the same way. And, you know, again, there will always be makeup. There will always be things you want to buy. There's always going to be new stuff that you want to try. My best advice is not to get suckered into that. Like I said, it's just kind of a part of this world that limited availability and limited drops and limited stock it just comes with the territory. And the other part of that is price. So you might think, oh, you know, independent shadows, you know, small, buying one at a time, probably a lot more cost effective than buying like a palette from a major brand. Let me quickly dispel that myth. Pricing, first of all, can vary quite a bit, especially when you're buying from brands maybe that are outside of your country. So you might be buying from brands in Canada, you might be buying from brands overseas, or you know, people in other countries might be buying from brands in the US. That can create a lot of cost, you know, as far as shipping goes. These things are delicate, so then there has to be like added cost in terms of how they get shipped. That plus the fact that these formulas, sometimes like multi-chrome formulas, duochrome formulas, can really like up the budget. You could be spending $20 a shade, more maybe, $17.50 a shade, $16.50 a shade, even $7 a shade. I mean, you have to start doing the hard math because it's very easy to get suckered into how beautiful something is and completely lose sight of how much it's costing you. You end up paying a lot. You really do. And it can be quite overwhelming. My biggest piece of advice is start out with creating a budget for yourself and stick to that budget. Like I said, quite easy to sort of get really excited, find yourself falling in love with shades, get really suckered into that like limited availability kind of world. And then all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, how much did I just spend on single eyeshadows? Pricing, availability, I would say those are two of the cons. Honestly, apart from that, I don't consider there to be a lot of cons. The only thing that I'll note is that sometimes, and it really depends on the brand and it depends on how many people are involved in it and how they're structured, but sometimes you can wait a while. Now, if you're somebody who's like used to Amazon culture and you're like, I expect to have things in my hand, you know, the next day or the day after that, I hate to break it to you, but like sometimes you might end up waiting quite a while for these products to come. These are like small brands that usually don't have a lot of support, and therefore that comes out in terms of how long you might wait for something. If you care about that, then you should know. If you don't care about that, I wouldn't consider it a con. You just have to kind of be aware of what you're getting yourself into. And that is inherently a part of this world. You usually have to wait longer for stuff. So anyway, those are the pros and the cons. I want to start talking about getting started. I wanted to talk a little bit about a resource that is relatively new and absolutely incredible for getting started with single shadows, and that is Firedrake Beauty Labs. So this was, I think, launched on, I don't know if it was Patreon or another one of those like Kickstarter-y type things, but this is a company that has created what they call a universal palette builder, which is the coolest thing. I'm going to put up some pictures over here to kind of show what I'm talking about, but basically you can build your own palette of any size with any brands that they currently have in their database. Customize a palette from 65 different brands. I don't even remember how many brands they have on there. I don't want to misquote it, but they try to stay up to date. Obviously, there's a lot of brands out there and there's a lot of shadow releases, so I know that they do their best to keep up, and they're pretty amazing. Like, I rarely go to there and don't see a shadow that I want to, help put into a palette not available. They make it so easy to create your own color stories, to find what you think might work together, to see what might be going on as far as budget, like they help you do the math. It is such an incredible resource. And if you are getting started in the single shadow world and you really feel like you need a tool to help you do that, that tool is the best tool that I could possibly recommend. It's amazing. You should definitely check them out and support them. I'll put the details about it below, but it's really cool and I really truly recommend it. That would be one of the first things I suggest. Another thing is, if you don't already, you should definitely start to follow some creators that specialize in sharing about single shades, so that you have resources for how things look when they're swatched out, how they look on the eyes. I have a few creators that I love and I would definitely recommend that you follow on YouTube and or Instagram. So there's Riley, who is Seeking Shifts. I've talked about her collab with Shine by SD, which is a smaller independent shadow brand. The Earthborn collaboration between them a lot, because they're some of my absolute favorite single shadows. But Riley has been doing single shadow content for a very long time on Instagram and recently launched what is now, I would say, quite the successful YouTube channel. And she just puts content out there that is incredibly helpful. Like, it's just so great to see her swatches, hear her opinions. She does amazing comparisons. I would definitely recommend that you check out her channel. There's a lot to see there. Similarly, I love Regina's Makeup Stash. She also does great independent shadow brand roundups, comparisons. She has these really great guides on Instagram that are super duper helpful. She does reels, just really shows off products in a way that helps you decide whether or not something might be for you or not. Catherine B. Beauty, also on YouTube. I love her channel. She puts out great single shadow content. She shows you single shadow roundup videos. She creates her own palettes. She does brand reviews. She does really amazing content that I have found to be super helpful. She's also absolutely a joy to watch. Millie, Bad to the Brow. You guys probably know her. I mean, she has a very large YouTube channel at this point, and she usually gets her hands on most releases. A lot of these people will also get PR, not all of them, but a lot of them get PR, so that you're able to decide, again, once they kind of show off the content and the products if it might be something you're interested in. And I rely on them a lot to sort of make these purchasing decisions. Millie's channel is amazing. She, again, does beautiful swatches, beautiful reviews, beautiful makeup looks, etc. Smitha Glam Smitty on Instagram and also on YouTube, I believe. Again, really amazing creator. And she does, oh my God, her swatches are beautiful. Her videos are beautiful. She's got such a calm like ethos about her. She's just, I love her. I love her so much. And she does amazing single shadow content. And Deandra Nicole also on, I don't think she's on YouTube. She might be. She's definitely on Instagram. That's where I follow her. Love her. Amazing swatches. Like she is chef's kiss. I love it. So I just wanted to name drop a few people. There are so many more, and there's more that I follow, but these are just some of the people that stick out in my mind as great resources for getting to know the single shadow world, getting to see brand reviews, getting to see swatches before a collection launches that might help you decide like, how does that compare to this shadow that I already have? Or like, how does that look on the skin tone, etc. I definitely recommend them. With that, I wanted to get into a few of the brands that I really love. I have not tried a lot of brands. There's more brands out there that I haven't tried than the ones that I have tried, but I have tried a few, and at this point I definitely have some favorites. And so you might have gathered what those favorites are if you've watched previous single shadow videos of mine, but I was just I want to share them here, just make sure this is a holistic starter pack video. So as you probably know, Clionadh Cosmetics, one of my favorites. I really love their shadows. I really love their stained glass collection. I think it is so beautiful. There's not a shade really that I don't want. Like they're all on my wish list, but I obviously can't have them all. And I just feel that their formula is really beautiful. I love the different... So Clionadh's stained glass collection is quite large, and there's different categories within that collection. It's really great to sort of test the waters, maybe get one from, different types of those categories to decide what formulas you like best, work for you, etc. But there's a lot there to love, and I really am just a huge fan. Similarly, I also love Terra Moon's cosmetics. I've talked about them a bunch, and I think that they come out with some extremely beautiful, unique shadows, and every time they come out with a launch, it's hard for me to I grit my teeth because I'm like, oh, I want that. Like, also beautiful, absolutely stunning, and just, a really fun brand to take a look at if you haven't tried them before. Shine by SD, which is, I'm newer to that brand, but I discovered them through Riley Seeking Shift's collaboration on the Earthborn set of shades. And man, I have fallen in love with Shine by SD. Absolutely. I haven't had a dud yet that I've tried from that brand, and I talk about the Earthborn collaboration all the time. Personally, those are like in my top tier of single shadows. I love them. So I'm excited to try more from Shine by SD, but they're definitely like high up there in terms of indie brands that I really like. Looxi Beauty is a very inexpensive single shadow brand. I've talked a bit about how the quality can vary from launch to launch, from shade to shade. I also know that if you are international, they are not really accessible to you, even though their price point is so low. So I say this with like a little bit of hesitancy, but for me, Looxi is one of my top brands because I am able to get a lot for my money, and I really love the formulas. Like I actually, even recently, I tried some shades from them where I was sort of like iffy on the formula when I swatched it, and then I started to wear them on my eyes, and I was like, man, these are beautiful. And so I love them. I couldn't do this video without giving them a shout out. I think they're great. And Dandelion's Cosmetics is the last one I want to mention just because they are, again, a small independent shadow brand. I happen to really love their matte shades personally. I think they do amazing shimmers as well, but where they really shine are their mattes. And I feel like if you're looking to build out your matte singles collection, they are a really, really great brand to support. I have not been unhappy with any of the matte shades that I bought from them. I've been super, super, super pleased. So anyway, that's a little bit of the roundup of the brands that I've tried and loved. There's, as I mentioned, like so many that I haven't tried. I haven't tried Divina. I haven't tried Sydney Grace or Glam Shop, some of these brands that maybe you've heard of if you've like dipped your toe into this world. There's a lot that I haven't tried. I'm working my way around the world and testing things here and there. That's a little bit of that roundup. That is a little bit about getting started. Now I kind of want to get into the actual mechanics of single shades and what I do and what maybe might be helpful for you. So the first thing that I want to talk about is storage, because this is one of the first questions that comes up when you're talking about single shadows. It can feel very overwhelming when you're like, okay, I've bought my like 4 single shades, but where do I keep them? What do I do with them? Where do I start? I'm going to share the storage solutions that I've used thus far. I have a few different places that I keep shadows that have made it possible for me to both store them in kind of like a massive way and then curate smaller collections. So let me show you my palettes that I have. So I have 2 larger form palettes right now, and then 1 kind of medium size palette that I use to store all of my shadows when I'm not using them in little individual color stories that I'm making. So these were all purchased from Amazon, but I believe all of the ones that I'm showing you are from Adept Cosmetics. But so this is probably my biggest block. This is from Adept. It's a big faux leather book basically, and this currently is housing, as you can see, my greens and purples. This is giving you a sneak peek at my full collection. Obviously, I'm not going to get into that in this video, but this is where I keep the mother load. And, this is a magnetized palette. So if you're buying an independent shade from a brand like the ones that I mentioned, all you're going to need to do is have a book like this, which is pre-magnetized, stick your shadow inside, and you're done. You don't need to do anything else. I also have this slightly smaller book where I'm keeping, let me open this up, my reds and pinks and yellows. Again, I'm trying to organize right now by color more or less. And this is just like another very similar, oh yes, this is from Adept too. So these are all storage solutions from Adept. Okay, so those are my 2 biggest books. And then I recently picked up, this is also from Adept. It is a double layered book. So there's a bit of a divider in between these sides. Let me show you. So there's a plastic divider between the sides that helps you obviously protect and cover your shades. And then both sides are magnetized. And I have my iridescents on one side and my neutrals on the other. And obviously space to grow. And then the outside of this is just like a hard plastic cover. So those are the 3 major palettes that I have at the moment for storage. Now I'm going to show you, I have some smaller palettes, again, a lot of which I've picked up from Amazon, some from another brand, where I use them to make my own color stories. The first is, these 2 are from Amazon. And these are basically just like smaller format books. Again, same concept. These are just empty palettes that are absolutely already magnetized, and I can use them to store singles and create color stories. This is a little bit larger, which is really helpful if I want to create a bigger color story. Then I have a smaller format one that has the same kind of shiny packaging. I feel like every singles collector has these style palettes, so I like to use this one for like a 6-pan or a 9-pan palette. And then I have a couple of these like longer circular storage palettes. Most common size for circle pans is 26 millimeters, and that's what this size is in here. So if I am using, a shadow that's in that pan, then I can use it and store it in here and create a cool color story that way. This one from Prisma palette, same deal. It's got the little holes in there for storage and works well. And then I have a little quad from Prisma palette that I use to make a little 4-up color story, same deal, 26 millimeter pans. And then I also have what I love. This is a little empty palette from Makeup Forever, and it has a mirror in it. And then this is just a magnet. So you can do this, however, you can organize this however you want. You could put circle pans in here, rectangle pans, square pans, whatever you want. But this is a really great little like travel size palette, and it's super cheap on Sephora. So I definitely recommend checking out these little ones from Makeup Forever. I've found this to be really great, especially for my Clionadh shades, which are kind of in those rectangle pans. That is the bulk of my storage. I'm at the end. I made a little palette that I'm going to show you and swatch for you, and I made that in a custom palette that I made myself, which again is pretty easy to do, and I can give you the tools and resources to do it down below, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what my storage situation looks like. Okay. Oh my gosh. I just remembered a creator that I so meant to put in the resources section, and I can't believe I forgot to name them. Faces by Gina on Instagram. Oh my gosh, what a resource. Not only do they have an incredible wealth of content around single shades, but they will show you in many different forms how to repan your shadows, which is so awesome. Because if you have a shadow that breaks and you don't want to get rid of it and you want to keep it, or if you want to take a shadow from a rectangle pan and put it into a circle pan, she absolutely is like the resource to go to learn how to do that. And I just love their content. So sorry, Gina, I didn't mean to skip over you. So the next thing that I want to talk about is ratios. So I think the biggest thing when it comes to independent shadow brands is that it's really easy to get excited about these special shades, whether it's a really incredible multi-chrome or a really beautiful duochrome or a sparkly topper. Like, we all love it, we all go for it, etc. But if you are interested in single shades in terms of being able to build your own color stories, your matte to special shade ratio is really important. And so I feel like a lot of people overlook purchasing mattes because they're so excited about the singles that are special. And then when they go to actually build a palette, they realize, oh no, I don't have what I want here to make this a cohesive, workable palette. Now, if you have some palettes in your collection and you're planning on just using those to fill in your gaps for mattes and you don't care if they're singles, then like ignore this whole section. But I think that a good 60-40 ratio matte to special shade is a really good kind of like rule of thumb. And most of the time when I'm making color stories myself, I tend to include a lot of mattes because that's what I reach for the most. And then I'll do like 2 or 3 special shades. So again, I mentioned Dandelions Cosmetics is one of my favorite smaller brands to buy mattes from. I know Lethal Cosmetics is really popular as well. I've never purchased from them, so I can't speak to the quality, but again, I know that they're a brand a lot of people seem to like the matte shades from. But yeah, I think the ratio, that 60-40 split is kind of important, and so I would advise that you do not overlook that. So with that in mind, you might think, okay, well, now I kind of know what brand I'm interested in, and I kind of know what ratios I'm looking at, and I kind of know what my budget is, and I think I have the storage, and you've gotten all of these things together, but you're still like, oh, I don't know where to start. What do I do? This is where the inspiration comes in. I started by saving images mostly on Instagram to a Dupe the Vibes like saved folder. And I continually go back to that folder to get inspiration on palettes that came out that I thought were really beautiful, but I didn't buy, that I used to then build my own palettes. So honestly, my best advice is to start by imitating. And then gradually, the more you do that, the more you're going to realize you find what you like and you start creating your own color stories, maybe without even having inspiration. So for instance, even just yesterday, Natasha Denona is coming out with a palette. I think it's called the Yucca palette. And the color story really appeals to me. It looks beautiful. And I saw that, and instead of immediately thinking, oh, I want to buy that palette, my first thought was actually, I think I want to try to dupe that palette, because I think that I have the shades in my own singles collection that I can bring that to life. So I saved that image to my Dupe the Vibes folder, and when I have a little time, I'm going to set it aside and I'm going to try to dupe it out. So start by saving imagery that you like or color stories that you like, even if they're custom color stories from another creator. And then you can refer back to those when you're thinking about, what do I want to buy? Or, what holes do I have in my collection? Where do I want to focus my efforts? I definitely started by doing a lot of imitating, and then more and more and more I've been just kind of like getting inspiration from random things and making palettes. But imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and don't be afraid to like base your initial purchase decisions on, well, I want that Pat McGrath palette, but I'm not going to buy that Pat McGrath palette, so maybe I can look at buying X and Y special shade, X and Y matte shade, and then I'll have my own version of that palette. If you haven't dipped your toes into this world before, the variety of formulas that people talk about, like flaky versus creamy versus dry versus piecey versus spicy, like all of those terms can be a little overwhelming. You're like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna like. You do know what you're gonna like, because if you're already thinking about approaching this world, then you are a makeup lover and you've worn makeup and you've tried makeup and you already have preferences. You've tried major brands, you have palettes in your life. I advise personally that you rely on that input that you already have to help gear some of your initial purchasing decisions. So if you know that you've tried a flakier formula from a major brand before and you weren't really into it, or if you know you really like creamy eyeshadows or like, you know, cream-based eyeshadows, or if you know that you're someone who just is obsessed with glitter, you know, like use that information to help guide you as far as formula goes when you start looking at some of these brands. And I think pairing that with seeing other creators share their information about the shades will really just give you as much information as you could have to make a really informed purchasing decision. Don't get overwhelmed by the amount of possibilities. Just kind of remember what are the things that you like and the things that you don't like. Okay, so that is my overview, and now I thought it would be fun to show you a custom palette that I just made as inspired by a palette that I saw. I think will hopefully give you some inspiration, and also we just love a good swatch party, right? So I couldn't do a video like this without doing some swatching. So I recently saw that the Mob Beauty collaborated with a makeup artist, I think Jessica Hayes. I have to remember her name. I'll put it below. It sold out. It's an all cream, all matte, I believe all matte, customizable palette that they released with her where they picked out the shades together, etc. And it was called Spring Goth, which I thought was really cute. And I wasn't going to buy it anyway, but that's besides the point. It sold out and I was like, ooh, but I really like the sort of vibes of that. And I decided that I didn't want to quite dupe the vibes of it, but I did want to kind of like take inspiration from it and create a little custom palette of my own. So the first thing that I want to show you is what it's inside. So remember when I mentioned I have the ability to make like a custom palette. So I found this. Some of you have seen it before. I've shared about it. This is a vintage cigarette case. You can get them on Etsy, you know, or find them in a thrift store. And I decided that I wanted to turn this into a mini palette. And there's an easy way to do that. All you need to do is get adhesive magnetized sheets from Amazon. I will link that down below. You cut them to size and you stick them inside and you have yourself a palette. So you can make a palette out of almost anything. You could make it out of an art supply box. You could make it out of chewing tobacco tin. You could make it out of, you can make it out of anything. All you need is a magnet and that's it. And you can get them really easily. So I magnetized this bad boy and I made a color story as inspired by Spring Goth. And I really love how this came together. I haven't actually used it yet on my eyes, but you can see what I was talking about, that matte to special shade ratio. Again, I think that's really important and often overlooked when people get excited and into the world of single shadows. This little palette is inclusive of a lot of the brands that I mentioned that I love. There's just like all of the brands that I kind of love and support are inside this little palette. So now I'm going to swatch it just for fun, just to show you how it came together, and then I'm going to wrap it up with some final thoughts. Okay, so here's a look at all of those shades swatched out from my custom palette. Again, this was inspired by Spring Goth, which was created by the Mob Beauty in collaboration with a makeup artist, and I thought it was really cool. And so this is my take on that, and I just quickly threw together some shades that I really liked. I have no idea exactly how this will work on the eyes, but it's definitely looking like something that would be fun to play with. Why can't I not do an outro to save my life? So Cam, if you're watching, and anyone else that's watching, I hope that you found this helpful, informative, not too overwhelming, and something that you can refer back to. It's really not that scary. You just have to go in with a plan and start slow. And then I know you're gonna fall in love. I just know it because there's so much here to fall in love with. I certainly have, and I'm happy about that love story. It's really become quite a joyous part of my life. I love color, I love eyeshadow, I love formulas, I love supporting small brands. Like, it's a win-win-win-win for everything except my wallet. So anyway, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you will give this video a like before you leave it and subscribe so that I can see you in the next videos. And I can't wait to talk to you soon. All right, bye.